Good afternoon, class. Thanks for coming out on a Monday. Everybody looks pretty darn good out there. Looks like you got relaxed in the weekend. I got pretty relaxed Saturday night. Mrs. Purdy fixed a wonderful dinner of ribs. We had some company over, and it went very, very, very well. Matter of fact, I had leftover ribs for lunch today. Those of you that haven't tasted it, go get married and stay married for 48 years, and maybe you'll find a good woman that'll make them for you. Just kidding, but it was really good. Had a good weekend. This morning, though, what I want to talk about is contracts. And before we do that, we do have a little unfinished business. You know, we did a quiz last Friday, and I graded these over the weekend. And there was one question that seemed to get everybody. And so I was going to go over that. It's just, it was one of those quizzes where we have a list of items that are real estate related, and then there's something in there that's not related to real estate. And many of you missed this one. I thought this would be an easy one, but maybe I'm overestimating things, especially those of you on parole or probation. The question was number 17. Name the item that does not belong on this list. And I'll give you the list. Escrow, earnest money, liquidated damages, tractor. I thought that'd be an easy one, but a lot of people picked earnest money. Only 2 people got tractor. So maybe we'll have to go back to the basics after a while. Today's contract. So when I was first learning the business years and years ago, one of the greatest real estate trainers in the world was a guy named Tommy Hopkins. He's probably still doing it. And when I signed up with this really small brokerage, matter of fact, kind of like ours, and his training was to stick me in the conference room and put these cassette tapes, I'm not kidding you, in this VCR and watch Tommy Hopkins. And one of his very first lessons was forbidden words to use in real estate. And I'm not going to go down the whole list of them because it's, first place, I probably can't remember all of them. But one of the biggies was signing the contract. What do people want to do when they're told to sign a contract? Well, they don't want to sign it. Of course not. What have they been told all their lives? Don't sign a contract. Don't sign anything. You can fix that. We're not signing the contract today. Today, would you mind approving the paperwork? So you're not signing a contract, you're approving the paperwork. And let's get CAR contracts. They're built with so much consumer protection, I know it's ridiculous. It'd be downright impossible for a real estate agent to steal from you using one of these things, because everything you do is on paper, everything's accounted for, and there's loopholes in there, and clauses, and dropout clauses, and protections. I think it was Arnold said that he could drive his Humvee through them. But the basics are you put this thing in writing. These are generated by computer. We've all got them. We buy the program. And you have a cover sheet where you put your buyer's names, their address, phone number, your name, and all the pertinent information about the property. How much down, how much you're going to borrow, when you're going to buy it, when you're going to close it. Anyway, you fill this out very carefully, and it auto-populates to all these contracts and forms. So, it's very simple to get somebody to endorse the paperwork. Because first of all, they're going to give you a check for the earnest money. Ask them what they can afford. Okay? If it's usually anymore, it's at least $1,000, but sometimes you can change it around. I've got some young married couple that, you know, they're not swimming in money. They do well, and they earn money at their jobs. But we did their deposit, $500 now and $500 on acceptance. So it's, you know, it's 6 of one, half times the other. Sometimes people put a huge deposit down, and that sort of sways the seller's mind that this is a better deal. But let's talk about the loopholes in this thing. First off, page 6 of 10, this one. Up here on paragraph 14, the seller has 7 days to provide all disclosures pertinent to the property. Little package of disclosures, and I'll hit those in just a minute. So he's got 7 days to produce those, and 7 days starts when the contract is accepted. If there's a couple of counter offer, it's when the final deal is, boom, accepted. That takes a couple of 2-3 days. That's the date the clock starts running. He's got 7 days to get you this stuff. If it's a condo, he's also got to provide condo rules, regulations, minutes of the meetings, and all that. That can be that can be a bitch. I hate to use that expression on tape. We sold a house in Gold River, which is a very nicely planned Robert Powell community here in Sacramento. And to get the condo docs, the items I just talked to, first of all, it's a stack that thick, $1,000. That's how much the seller had to pay to have this company generate this package. But it's required. The seller has to give you these things. And you want the latest, you're paying money so you get the latest changes. If they decided at a meeting that you can't have red cars in there, you know, or whatever it is. Like in this place, you can only paint your house the color that it was originally painted in 1980. Can't ever change it. They have the color palette, and that's what your house will be painted, period. So they're a little strict. Other places are looser. But as far as a basic transaction, the seller does have a strict obligation to provide disclosures, and I'll hit those in just a couple minutes. It's got 7 days. You have 17 days, and I always take 17 days from the date of a contract acceptance. Some people say, well, no, it's really 17 days from the time they give you these disclosures. There's not that much to do. Go over the disclosures. If the guy says, you know, I grew pot plants in the backyard, or you know, I cook meth in the kitchen. Well, you don't want to do that because that's a whole different thing that makes that house unsaleable. But if he says things like, you know, sometimes I flush the toilet and, you know, I don't know, the dishwasher goes on. They have to tell you all that stuff. They're required to, or they're going to be subject to some real problems down the road. So he's going to give you these. There's a thing called a transfer disclosure statement. And a couple others, and there's a water heater, smoke detector, water heater disclosure, smoke detectors, CO detectors, and so on. And there's a whole raft of them. He's going to give them to you, and you're going to sit down with your client, or if you're buying a home, you're going to sit down with your real estate agent. If it's a good guy like me, we'll go over all of them. If it's somebody that doesn't really care, he'll just toss them and say everything looks good, let's move on. Go over them anyway. You've got to sign them. And you've got to sign some other things too, but these are... The point being, and that's 17 days, you can pull the plug on this deal anytime you want. You don't even need a reason. Went back. My wife got a headache. Every time she walked in the front door, she looked off to the right, saw these weird curtains that gave her a headache. We can't buy the house. You can give a reason, or you can just say, we don't want the house. 17 days. They can't keep your money. Escrow's got to return it. It's spelled out very clearly. You also have an obligation to go out and get yourself a mortgage. Usually the mortgage falls kind of in that same category. They want to make sure that you are ready, willing, and able to purchase their house. And that means your mortgage lender has to provide a copy of an approval. And I don't mean a letterhead that says these are really good people. We used to give those out all the time. I've got one on my computer. I can print it up and I can make it say anything I want. We don't use those anymore. We put them through, because we're also a lender, but we put our borrowers through a process that gives what's called desktop underwriting. You put all the crap in there in this matrix program, comes back and it's kind of a pre-approval from the lender, but that's what that's DU, and then from there they go full speed. And they take all the stuff and confirm it, and then they approve your loan. You are approved. Now, that's a very critical point, because the seller is going to ask you to release that contingency. Thing here called contingency release. And a good agent is going to start hammering you pretty good. There's the loan. There's the appraisal contingency. Hey, if the appraisal comes in under value, you know, you better be on top of this or you're going to get stuck paying the difference. It happens. All these kind of things. And then finally the biggie, buyer hereby removes all contingencies. That means we are moving forward. And if we change our mind, or if we cancel, or if you get run over by a truck, or whatever might happen to you, what happens to your earnest money? Well, we have a clause called liquidated damages, and we agree through this damage, and I say we, meaning the buyer and the seller, have agreed that your deposit money will serve as remedy for all their problems. And so, you know, back in the old days, they'd sue and say, you must buy this house, and we took it off the market, and it cost us a buyer, all this crap. Not anymore. You drive a truck through this one, liquidated damages. And if you got $500 or $600 or $1,000 up, and you drive around the corner, this agent comes and says, "Hey, my neighbor just put his house up for sale. It's better than this one. It's a lot cheaper. It's a lot nicer. It's a better neighborhood." He takes you over there, and you decide you want to buy that house. Say, "Gee, we've already removed our contingencies." Well, you notify the other guy, "Hey, we're not buying the house. You can keep our deposit." So I always tell him, this new house, it better be $1,000 better than the one you're getting out of, because you're going to lose that money. I don't recommend buyers out shopping around. That's not a commitment, in my opinion. But it happens. And those are the rules. Also, we don't sue each other in this business. How about that? It says here that we agree to arbitration. Okay? Arbitration can be any number of things. You close on the house, you flush the toilet, it blows up in your face with sewage everywhere. You look at transfer disclosure statement, didn't say anything about a toilet. SSD, seller price, no. Nowhere on there did it say anything about that. So you go to you look up the seller and you say, "Hey, I know we closed escrow, but I think you cheated me." And I'm not being a lawyer, I'm just showing you kind of the mechanics. You go to arbitration. You sit down with an arbiter. Usually it's a retired judge or God knows who, and you sit down with them. Each side tells their tale. Thank God I've never been through this. I've heard many people tell the story. And he sits there and he says, "Yes, you owe this guy over here $1,000 because he had to have a plumber come out and snake all that stuff and everything else." So that's just a kind of a crazy thing. By the way, I wanted to throw something else into the mix here for fun. How many times, when I was coming up in this business, whenever anyone would ask about benefits of home ownership, we were taught to say, check with your accountant, check with your lawyer. Well, everybody knows the benefits of home ownership, and a first-time home buyer needs to be told what those are. Obviously, you don't need to be a PhD. You don't have to be an accountant. You don't have to be anything. You can be a lowly real estate agent like me, and I know that you can deduct the taxes you pay. You can deduct the property insurance you pay on your residence. You can't depreciate it. You can't, the insurance can't be deducted. I know that much. I also know that you can go to your employer and say, "We just closed on a new house, and we anticipate having some tax savings at the end of the year, so we'd like to raise our exemptions slightly so we can take home a little bit more pay to make these house payments along the way." I said we'd be brief today. Oh, one last question. I had a question somebody asked me on Facebook. Matter of fact, a real close friend of mine. It's the only people that watch these things. And she said, "What about as is? What about a house with structural problems or any of that kind of stuff? Can it be sold?" Yes, it certainly can be sold, as long as you disclose this to the buyer. Now, here's where the rub comes. On these property disclosures, which we're going to take a whole nother class, because I know you guys are getting your, you got your swim trunks on, you're squirming around, you want to get down to the pool, you want to get wasted. We're going to do that. You want to make darn sure it's on the disclosure, number one. Number two, if your buyer is getting a loan, an FHA loan or a VA loan, it's not going to fly. FHA does an inspection, an appraisal. It's kind of a little bit of an inspection, and VA does one that's much more detail. And both of those parties are going to ask for a clear termite report. So, if you sell it to a cash buyer or you sell it contingent, and you do not check the box on there that says anything about pest work, yeah, you can sell it to them, as long as everybody's on board. That is the whole idea behind all of this stuff. Everybody is aware of everything in this deal, and there's no hiding, there's no lying, there's no BSing. I mean, you can BS somebody, try to sell them something. This is the greatest house ever. There's a synagogue over there and a deli over here, and you're going to love it. Okay, fine. But when it comes to this paperwork, there's no margin for error whatsoever. If it says that the seller is to pay title fees and escrow fees, and they check it off and everybody signs it, and it comes down to escrow, and the seller is sitting there and say, "No, I'm not paying those," well, at that point, you can kind of put the brakes on it and say, "Yes, you are." It's all in the paperwork. Paperwork's not difficult. It's very easy to understand. Loaded with loopholes. There has to be a hell of a lot of good faith between both parties. Cooperation, honesty, keep everything above board, and full disclosure. And you can have a nice deal and everybody goes home happy. The seller gets his money. He's on the road to Omaha or wherever they're moving. your client's happy because you've done a good job for them. You've got them in their home, and